Okay, people, I'm back. And as you can see, with my handy dandy mixer, and I have a lot of explaining to do. So by coincidence, everybody saw a couple weeks ago, I tested out Chef Yost. I don't know how to pronounce his last name. But long story short, he was the pastry chef under the Obama and George W. Bush administration. I tried out his famous apple pie recipe, which was one of Obama's favorite recipe to try. And by chance, this week, I go on Facebook, because now Facebook is doing Facebook memories. And about 10 years ago, it is for a fact, the first pie that I tried to make from scratch, and it is terrible. Honestly, I probably have the footage somewhere because I definitely recorded and took pictures. I was so proud of myself. It took all day. And it came out the oven, and it wasn't disgusting, but it really wasn't good. You can tell by the picture. I might just insert it here so you can see why I'm laughing, because I remember tasting it and I was so proud of myself even though it was fucking terrible. And I remember that weekend too, I was on a baking kick, and I tried to make some jalapeno and cheddar bread at the same time from scratch. Now that was actually fucking disgusting. Sorry for the F-bomb, I'm reminiscing. And one of my best friends, Courtney, I will never forget, she's such a ride as I. She tried it and she's like, oh, it's so good. Oh, you're so creative. And I was sitting there I know this tastes disgusting. You don't have to lie to me. Oh God, memories. Nonetheless, it came back, made me super nostalgic, and I was like, what did I do wrong? This crust is not right. What did I do wrong? Honestly, I definitely was using somebody's recipe off the internet, because I remember going out of my way to buy a food processor and do all this stuff, and none of it worked. And you can tell it looked dry. The dough, I remember, was really sweet. It looks nasty. It's not flaky or good how it's supposed to be. The only thing that saved it was the filling was good, which I guess that makes sense. I usually make fillings like that on the regular. I just don't make it as a pie. So even though it was my first time making a pie, the pie filling was actually really good. That's kind of what saved it. But the actual pie itself altogether, I give it maybe a 4 because that crust was terrible. Nonetheless, now that I've tried this apple pie recipe, I just went online and started looking up chicken pot pie, excuse me, recipes, and I was like, this cannot be that hard. This crust, these crust recipes for the most part, they're not the same. I'm they look so similar to what I made last week, and that crust was amazing. It was so good. I remember having that apple pie being this crust specifically is amazing. So I'm why don't I just remix this apple pie and do a before and now, so we can see how much I've improved my homemade cooking skills. I've always cooked, but doing things from scratch, it's been a work in progress. So yeah, I wanted to remake this recipe, which is why I have my handy dandy mixer. Honestly, I was supposed to make it last weekend. I've had all the ingredients just lingering in my house. It's just the thought of making pie crust, it's terrible. That one apple pie took me all day to do, but the thing that I struggled with the most was dealing with the crust. To be fair, it's officially fall, so it's really cold, so I think now at least the temperature in my house is going to be on my side. But on top of that, I'm just in the mood to kind of just bang it out because I'm tired of looking at all the ingredients in my house. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually make 2 crust recipes separately. I was thinking about doing one big batch, but things go funny when you try to rush in and do big batches. So I'm going to do 2 separate crust quantities. One I'm going to use today, another one I'm just going to stick in my fridge, so in the future I've actually been craving fruit pies. I don't know why. I think it's just like the fall thing to do. So if I go apple picking, or if I do any kind of like, you know, fall festivities and get some, you know, fresh fruit from the farmer's market or something like that, I can just make it at home. The filling takes literally like 20 minutes. It's really the crust that's like the nightmare thing to cook. So I'm gonna do that right now. I'm not sure if I want to finish this pie today. I want to, but I'm not sure if I'm going to. So I guess TBD. It kind of just depends on my mood and how I feel and how quickly I can do this. So with that being said, I'm going to stop talking. I'm gonna start this pie crust and I will be back. I'll just fast forward through this footage. Peace. All right, y'all, I'm gonna pause here. So last time I did this, this lighting, I pre-cut a ton of cubes of butter and I stuck it in the fridge because you need to keep your butter and your water ice cold to get that flaky consistency for your pie crust. I forgot I had a handy dandy pie crust cutter in my kitchen. Now, I'm not going to hand mix pie crust. This works fine. It's amazing. But I saw online, and again, I don't want to buy extra kitchen equipment, and I don't want you guys to look online and think that you need a food processor or even this pie crust thing. I'm just trying it out right now because it's handy. So what I'm going to do is, for the recipe that I did before, I'm going to use the same modification that I did, which was I'm doing equal parts butter. Actually, I did more butter. I would say like 60-40 ratio, 60% butter, 40% vegetable shortening. I'm gonna do that. The only thing is that my vegetable shortening I don't put in my freezer, and I want that to be colder. And I noticed it just like took a little extra like arm work to kind of mix the butter and the shortening together with the flour when I did it last time. So I'm gonna try out this cutter. I'm gonna put the butter in this bowl, put some shortening in, just cut it together, and then afterwards I'm just gonna dump it into my mixer with, I have a dough hook attachment right now on it. Dough hook attachment, it works fine. You do not have to do this. Again, you don't have to do this. Just something that I'm trying right now. If you don't have a food processor, you honestly, last time I did it, just cutting the butter into small chunks and keeping everything cold, that was like the thing that took me all day, is I kept putting the dough back in the freezer or the fridge. It worked for me. Some people will like freeze the butter and they'll take a grater and then just grate the butter like that. Honestly, I just don't have the patience for that. And this works just as fine. It works just as fine in my opinion. So if you want to, or even if you don't have a mixer on hand, a freestanding mixer on hand, then you can use a cutter. If you don't have a cutter, you can use 2 knives, you can use a fork, you can use whatever. Again, cooking to some extent is science, but to some extent home baking, it's supposed to be fun because you're freehanding it, right? So just use what you have on hand, and also don't be like me. Make sure you check to see what's in your kitchen cabinets, because this may have came in handy. We'll see. I'm gonna test it out. Alrighty guys, so my first batch of dough has come together. So as you can see here, look at this. You don't want the dough to be smooth. You just want to add enough water really slowly for the dough to come together. That's like the most annoying part that you have to wait for. So I'm just gonna take this out. I have a mat down with some cornstarch. That is my trick to not make it stick. It works better than flour. I'm going to quickly just knead this, put it together, put it in a square, put this in the freezer, and then I'm gonna start on my, actually I'll probably use this one today. So I'll put this in the fridge so that way it's easier to work with. Then I'm gonna start my second batch just so I can freeze it for a later date. But just really quickly, this dough recipe is really easy. It's just 3 cups of flour. I did a stick and a half of butter that I chopped up into pieces that you saw. I eyeballed it. I did about 3/4 of a cup of vegetable shortening that I put together. Then I did somewhere between 1/2 cup and 3/4 of a cup. I used a lot more water. If you saw me coming back, know what I thought. It should be ice water. And yeah, if the ice cube falls in like mine did, you can just take it out and put more water in it. It's whatever, it's just ice water. And I used a 1.5 tablespoons of some kosher salt. And did I miss anything? No, I think that's just about it. So yeah, it's very easy, very simple. It just takes a long time when you have to like knead this and roll out a little bit on, and again, it takes a longer time if you do it in the middle of the summer like I was doing. This is probably why people like to make pies in the fall. All right, so let me get to it, and I will also show you again the consistency here. Let me take this off a little bit more. Do not smooth out and over mix your dough. I hope you can see this. This is what the texture of it should look like, just enough to come together to where when I mash it down, it's firm. It should not be smooth. It should have a rusted feel. That's what's gonna help keep it flaky. So anyway, let me quickly do this because it needs to be cold, and I'll get this in the fridge. Also too, I don't think I'm a fan of that pie crust cutter. I'm gonna try it again, but maybe not worth the money. So very quickly, here's things that are important when you're thinking about your dough. When you are kneading it, and again, it's not to make it smooth, you just want the dough to come together. Always think of squares, rectangles, and flipping the dough on top of each other. You think about a flaky crust, you want layers. So anytime you're doing a dough that has a lot of butter that needs to be flaky, whether it's a pie crust, a croissant, a puff pastry, whatever, think of layers, think of squares, think of rectangles. Also, don't try to make it too thick, because the thicker that dough is when you put it in the fridge and everything combines and comes together, it's going to be harder for you to roll out. So if you do it you know, on the medium size, that's kind of like the sweet spot. You kind of have to eyeball it depending on how much. All right guys, so it's been over an hour. My dough has been resting, so my camera battery died, so I got cut off. One of the things that I was telling you was that it's very important for your dough to rest at least an hour. Some people do their dough and do it overnight. You just need the gluten to develop and the flavor to develop, so that way you don't have flavorless dough that just tastes like flour. Like if you had a bad crust, you know what I mean. It has no flavor, and it does nothing for your pie. Anyway, so right now I'm gonna work on the filling. So I have some chicken tenders because they need to be in cubes. So people have different methods about what they want to do in terms of making the filling. So I'm just gonna use tenders. I have to cut it into cubes, so it's kind of pre-cut for me. I have some oil right now heating on the stove, so I'm going to chop these up. I'm going to cook these. Then the next thing I'm going to do is peel. Right here I have a bowl of all my veggies. I'm going to peel my potatoes. They need to be cooked. They've gotten a little old because I've been waiting to start this recipe, and then I'm going to cook that next. So I like to pre-cook my filling on the stove, so that way I know that it is cooked through, or at least to get it going. I rather that than me filling up the pie crust and then not knowing if when I take the pie out the crust may be cooked but the filling may not be, having raw chicken, having some hard potatoes, etc. So I think just for the sake of being able to control how things cook, I like to pre-cook things in the oven. After I do this, I'm gonna let the filling cool for a bit. I'm gonna cook my potatoes, take it off the heat, then I'm gonna chop up my carrots and onions, cook until they get a little bit translucent. I forgot to get celery, but never fear, we have a backup. I had some celery seed in my cupboard, so I'm gonna use some celery seed. Then I'm going to put in chicken bouillon right here and chicken stock. And then I'm going to flavor with just salt and pepper. Once that comes to a simmer, I'm going to add in some half and half. Some people like straight up heavy cream. Heavy cream, I think, is just it's a little too heavy. And sometimes the flavor of heavy cream overpowers, so I think half and half is good. If I had milk, I'd probably do half and half and a little bit more milk, but don't have any. And I'll probably put in a little bit of flour, maybe cornstarch if it doesn't thicken on its own. I'm gonna play it by ear on that just to see. Then after it cooks up and it cools, I'm going to, right now I'm defrosting my piece. I'm gonna rinse these off and then I'm gonna throw it in. You wanna put these at the end because you don't want them to get mushy and overcooked, and you want them to hold their shape. So I think you should just cook the filling, let it rest, add these in. Then simultaneously, once this gets done and gets going, I am going to, people also do not like to do this with chicken pot pies. I'm gonna do it in this case. I'm gonna work on rolling out the dough that I have resting because I want to pre-cook the bottom portion of the pie. Again, this is to make sure I can control how things cook. I don't want my bottom pie dough to be undercooked or doughy. And I also want to make sure I get that flaky kind of texture. So that is what I'm gonna do. Some people do that, some people don't. It's kind of sort of up to you. So I'm just gonna do it how I prefer. Anyways, let me fast forward through this and I'll let you guys watch me get through it. Okay, I'm gonna pop back on here. It's very, very hot. I don't know if you can see. Can you see that steam coming up on my face? So here's the chicken. I'm letting it cool down. It's about 75 to 80% cooked all the way through, and I made sure to put some salt and pepper just so that way I'm seasoning as I go. Nothing too crazy though, because I don't want like any other seasoning, so like seasoning salt or something else to like overpower the flavor of like the traditional chicken pot pie. You can hear the potatoes going right now on the stove. I actually let them just cook in the oil and the chicken juice that rendered from the chicken, so that way you can still have the chicken flavor. And then afterwards, I'll probably, you know, do the same thing, let it cook 75 to 80% of the way because it'll finish cooking in the oven. Throw the potatoes on top of this chicken here, and then I'm going to cook the carrots and the onions separately, less cook time there, and after they're translucent, then I'll start to thicken it and add in all of the liquids and extra seasonings that we're putting in. Yeah, and again, this is just so I can control how things are cooking and how things are going, so I'll just keep moving along. I'm coming back on. So the trick to roll out your dough, it's not the motion. I know people are tempted to do that with a rolling pin, but what you really have to do is put it down, apply pressure, and slowly stretch it out to get that good medium to like thin size layer. So don't be too aggressive with it. Be patient. If it gets a little too moist, put it in the refrigerator. I can't say this enough. Put it in the refrigerator. Also too, in terms of surface area, make sure if you have like a mat or something like I have, you're probably going to go over the surface area. Usually it's just easier to do it on the countertop, but in terms of lifting and maneuvering, I think having something under it, particularly a silicone mat, is very, very easy and just makes it a little bit more manageable for me. Or again, if I want to put it in the fridge, I can just put it on a silicone mat. So anyways, even though I use the mat, I always anticipate, especially too when I'm trying to shape something, that it will go outside of the mat. So I also put cornstarch outside of the mat just in case, and make sure that my surface area on my cutting board is clean as well. Okay, the plate. Here's what I'm doing with the plate. So this plate is literally, the diameter of this is just about the circumference of the, not circumference, it's the diameter of the pie tin that I have. However, if you know about the bottom layer of a pie, you kind of have to let it hang down in to actually like scoop in, get the bottom surface and the sides. So what I did was, I want the bottom layer to be a little bit more, the diameter of the cake crust for the bottom layer to be a little bit more than this diameter of this plate. So what I did to guesstimate is that I started with one circle pressed down so I get the print, and then I kind of maneuvered around. So I did 4 prints to kind of get a guesstimate of what it would be to have one bigger circle with a bigger diameter, if that makes sense. Then I'm going to put the excess in the fridge so it can cool down, because it's starting to get too warm. That's another reason why I'm doing this, because it's going to be the top part of my crust. And then this bottom one, I'm going to stretch it out again, cut off some excess, use it as the bottom, and then use that excess to be on the top layer. Because the width is still a little too high, but the crust, the butter and the crust is starting to melt. So I want to put it in the fridge. Remember, the refrigerator is your friend. Finally got the bottom layer on and inside the pizza pie, so you don't really need to push it down. You kind of let gravity work in your favor, which is why I also re-rolled it to get some extra. You kind of just lift, you see what I'm doing here in the corner, and then it just drops down on its own. And I kind of just do that all the way around so the pie crust can naturally fall into place. And then I don't have to be fighting with it and accidentally get tears trying to make the pie dough get to the bottom. So just to avoid that, you just gotta be a little patient. That's like the #1 thing with dough. That's why it takes all day. Patience and the refrigeration. The temperature is the best thing. I'm very happy how it's holding up. It's starting to melt, I'm not gonna lie, but at least I got this in the pan. So I'm going to trim this, take the excess off, put it with the rest of the dough in the fridge, the excess, because that'll be for my top layer. And then I'll also put this in the fridge for a little bit, again, because you need this to be cold before you put it in the actual oven, because having a cold dough is going to get you that flaky texture that you're going for. So always remember that. Cold, 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 cold. Okay, just got my pie crust out of the fridge, so now I'm going to pre-cook this because, again, my filling right now is cooling, but it has a lot of liquid in it, so I just want to make sure that when we put the liquid in, that the actual bottom layer of this dough actually cooks through and it doesn't get super soggy, nothing like that. I also did add a little bit of cornstarch into my filling, it just a little bit, just so that way I know, can ensure that it will be thick. Usually you don't, because in this chicken pot pie I'm putting potato, so there's natural starches that come out of the potato, but I just wanted to be err on the caution of just being safe, because it was still kind of loose. It's cooling down, so I know it will still continue to thicken up, and then also too, when I put it back in the oven, it will also thicken up. But just to be on the safe side, add a little bit of, you know, just a tiny bit in there for my own sanity purposes. So now, anyway, getting on to this. So I do not have beans, dried out beans. I do have rice, but I don't want to waste it. I need something to weigh this down. So I thought, okay, this should work. I'm going to put some aluminum foil on the top, put my cake pan inside to weigh it down, because I know this can be in the oven, and then see if this, I think this actually will work perfectly, because it fits almost perfectly into the center, and I don't think it will tear the dough if I use this pan to actually weigh it down. So this is gonna work, so I'm gonna do that real quick. I'm probably going to cook this dough for about 15 to 20 minutes. We'll see. Again, I don't need it to cook all the way, I just need it to get it going. It'll cook through once I put the top layer of dough and finish everything up and put in the filling. So just need to get it going on that end. So with that, let me just get this in the oven. Also too, because you want the dough to cook through, when you put on the aluminum foil, don't like pack it in, just lightly put it enough so that way you have some space for the steam to come through for it to vent. So you can see it's not super tight, it's still loose in here. I just crumbled it enough to cover around the edges, and then I'm gonna pop this in the oven. I'm so nervous. That did not go as planned. So let me tell you the mistake that I made. I put my pie crust in the oven without putting a cookie sheet under it, and the weight of the cake pan and the pie crust worked a little too well. So as it was baking, some of the butter and the vegetable shortening dripped to the bottom of my oven and then proceeded to burn. It's been a great afternoon, okay? I tried baking it twice. The bottom of my oven was still burning. Then I had to let it completely cool, so I let some of the residual heat try to bake that bottom pie crust. Didn't really work out that well. Once it completely cooled, I wiped as much as of the oil from the bottom of my oven as I could. But yeah, did the best that I could there. So now I cooked it a little bit more, but I cooked it at 315 degrees so it wouldn't burn. To be honest, the bottom is still a little underdone, but this is what we're working with. Is what it is. I'm determined to finish this today. I am, however, extremely nervous that once I put it back to 350, it wasn't even like the 400s, but once I put it back to 350, I'm nervous that like it's still going to burn, because I wasn't able to get all of the grease off the bottom of the oven, and I just ordered some oven cleaner. It's not gonna come until 2 days from now. It is what it is. Anyways, I have my dough for the top sheet. The filling is cool. I'm gonna roll this out. I'm gonna assemble the pie, and hopefully I'll try to preheat the oven after I finish assembling it. If things don't burn, I will cook this pie today. I really want to eat this pie today, to be honest with you. I haven't eaten that much today. If not, then it's going to be maybe sometime this week kind of situation, in terms of me eating it. But assuming that we can figure out the oven situation, I'm going to, the last step actually is cut some vent into the top of the pie. I'm gonna put egg wash on it, and then I'm gonna sprinkle it with some flaky sea salt, and I don't have fresh black pepper, but I will add a tiny bit of black pepper to give the crust on top some flavoring, and then call it a day. So we'll see. It's 4 o'clock, and I'm running out of natural light, so we'll see if we get this done. So let me just speed through this. are cut. So egg wash, seasoning, and then I'm going to put this in the oven. It looks like it's working now for 350 for about a half an hour, 35 minutes. Honestly, until it gets golden brown and until everything cooks through. And then I'll be back after I finish this. Okay, everybody. There you have it. Woo, let me set her down because she is creamy. I remade my chicken pot pie. This looks 1,000 times better. Oh my god, do you see how amazing that crust looks? The one that I posted from 10 years ago, I'm actually really proud of myself. I'm going to let this cool, and I'm not going to taste test it on camera. I think what I'm going to do is taste test it on Instagram and kind of give my review of the actual like flavor of it. I tasted it as I was cooking. It actually tasted pretty good, so I'm not that concerned. Like, I know from my memory. I remember the day when I made that first pie that this one tastes 1,000 times better. Like every single element of this tastes 1,000 times better. So I'm very, very proud of myself. So again, probably be posting about it on the gram. If you'd like to follow me on the gram, I do more live updates there. My handle it's D720, so ITZD720. So yeah, if you want to follow me on a regular basis, do that. I'm kind of curious to know what are your thoughts from the before when I was in my early 20s to now. Not even early 20s, I'm 30 now, so I would have been 20 years old when I made that first pie. I would say the glow up in the kitchen has been real. In any case, thank you all for watching. Have a good one, guys. Peace. Okay, guys, bonus clip time. So remember I kept telling you about folding to make sure you get the crust? I wanted to focus so you can see what I mean, and you can see the layers in this crust. All right, there you go. Do you see the flaky layers that I have along the edge? Fold, 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 and keep the crust as cold as you possibly can. I'm telling you, it's a game changer. All right, guys, that's it for my bonus tip. Peace.